Morning. My name is Jeff Clark. I'm the production manager with Prince William Sound Aquaculture Corporation in Alaska. We're one of the regional private nonprofit corporations that exist in Alaska. And today I'm going to talk about Gulkana Hatchery specifically. It's one of the 5 that we operate. Gulkana was originally and is a state-owned project that we now operate. Before there was any hatchery there, in 1964, there was extensive flooding where the hatchery site is now located, and that wiped out part of the Richardson Highway, and it also wiped out some of the spawning grounds. And when they went back in and redesigned the road, the whole area the whole floodplain had become much more narrow and straight, and they lost a lot of spawning ground when that happened. And so as a result of that, in the late 60s and the early 70s, the returns were obviously quite diminished from that event. And so they started looking at enhancement efforts. Where can we put some enhancement projects? And so they eventually, before that even, one of the other criteria is low cost, low maintenance. And so they started looking for areas with that criteria, and they eventually discovered a spring that was, and I'll have a map of it here in a second, that was the key to the whole project. It was a stable flowing water source between 3 and 5 degrees Celsius year-round. And that was even the case. The first year they did monitoring on it, they actually recorded negative 45 degrees Celsius temperatures, and the spring was still flowing without a problem at the temperatures, 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. All right, so there's 2 Gulkana hatchery sites. Gulkana 2 here, which I'm not going to talk too much about today. We still do take some eggs there. That's earlier run timing than the Gulkana 1 site. The Gulkana 1 site up here is where the main spring is located. The Gulkana River is a tributary of the famed Copper River. And this is an aerial view of the Gulkana 1 site here, and the spring runs all along the side of the hill. This is the main stem of the Gulkana coming out of Summit Lake at that stage. The current egg take numbers at the Gulkana 1 site, currently taking 35 million eggs. The Gulkana 2 site, 1.75 million eggs. And then here's the nursery lakes where we're putting those. So Paxson Lake, which is just below the Gulkana 1 and Gulkana 2 sites, 6 million of those fry are released on site and out migrate down into Paxson Lake for rearing. 10 million are flown into Crosswind Lake down here. And then the remaining 6 million are put up into Summit Lake, up in this area. I just threw a quick picture of the egg take in there. I'm not going to discuss too much of that. The pool where you see this egg take building was the main spring pool that existed out of that spring. And so that's where they located the hatchery building, the egg take building. And then you can see a good shot of a radiator returns here. And of course, Alaska sockeye salmon culture procedures are strictly followed. Another one, besides the spring, another one of the key elements of the Gulkana hatchery is still using gravel substrate in the in-stream incubators. And it is labor intensive. They did several studies initially when they first established this site. They tried round gravel, which is what you see up here. This is the round gravel. They tried crushed gravel, which apparently was in vogue at the time. And then they also tried some plastic substrate material. And three of those, they also, at the same time, they cordoned off a small section of the stream. They allowed some natural spawning to occur in there, and then they blocked it off so that they could study what came out of there. And so for all three of those substrates, none of them produced fry in the incubators they were using at the time. None of them produced fry that were as large or as robust as the naturally emerged ones. But of all of them, the round substrate produced the most similar emergence timing as the natural fry. And so that's what they went with. In addition to the fact that plastic substrate would have been 30 times more expensive at the time. So what they do, this is a picture of the incubator here, a plastic tote incubator. And they put roughly 3 centimeters of this pea gravel substrate on the perf plate itself. And then on top of that, they put about 20 centimeters or so of this round gravel substrate. This stuff is about 3 centimeters. The pea gravel is about 0.6 centimeters. And here's a shot of the incubation head box building. There's only about 6 feet of head between the spring over here and this building. And then the 132 incubators, plastic tote incubators, and then these aluminum boxes that you see down here are just the collection boxes for the out migration. They do a volitional out migration. So they let the fry come out when they want. They just leave the lids on and the fry do what they need to do. They do count them into the raceways, again, because we need to know how many are going into the different nursery lakes. And so they do count them before going to the raceways. Even before going to the raceways, though, they have to be strontium marked with strontium chloride salt. This project began in 2000, and they're now able to mark 100% of the fry with the strontium chloride, which obviously has some benefits for monitoring and evaluation. So here's some quick pictures of the strontium marking itself. They're in a 24-hour static bath at 1,000 parts per million. It is circulated with a pump, and then there's supplemental oxygen, of course, as well. And then after that 24 hours, they can go into the raceways. The raceway, the on-site fish that go into packs, and they can release those more or less right away, right into the river, and those can go down. So those are relatively straightforward and easy. They don't have to keep those as fed fry for very long. The other fish going up to Summit Lake and Crosswinds Lake, they have to wait for ice out, and that usually doesn't happen until sometime around the end of May. And so they end up holding these fish on site until that occurs. Sometimes it can be up to 3 weeks that they'll hold them and feed them. But they're just feeding them to maintain, not for any growth because of limited rearing space. So this is the ideal Summit Lake release. Summit Lake is on the road system. This is, I believe it's Gun Creek running in, it's an inlet going into Summit Lake itself. And so in good years they can do this. There's been years where the ice hasn't gone out. Summit Lake is a high alpine lake above tree line, and they've had to go through 4 to 6 feet of ice to find water to put the fish into before. So this is beautiful. The crosswinds fish are obviously flown into the lake. It's a remote lake, and saw some pictures like this for one of Val's projects down there in Detroit. They use the Thrush agricultural airplane for that. There's also some smolt out migration projects at the outlets to do enumeration, and then also they can look at the condition of the fry at this time. We do plankton sampling on all the nursery lakes to monitor that, but one of the best indicators is when the smolt are coming out. If you can look at the size of the smolt compared to historic, and you can see when there's a problem even without the plankton monitoring. Wanted to throw in there a little bit about the otolith prep. It's very similar to looking for a thermal mark. So you're shaving off or grinding down some of that otolith to get to the center, so to speak. One of the big differences with strontium, you just have to get it to a mirror finish before it can go into a scanning electron microscope. So that's what these guys are doing. And then of course it goes into the scanning electron microscope. So our guys will travel up to the University of Fairbanks where they have this, and then they'll read all the slides. And that's a picture of what the strontium looks like underneath the scanning electron microscope. The goal, of course, to all of this is harvestable adults. And so you can see, just a quick summary down here. There's been blips in some years. I think I saw, reviewing the data, as high as 1 million fish return and as low as 86,000 fish return from this project. But on average, you can see over a 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year period, survivals have been very, very uniform, right around 1.5 to 1.7%. That's fry released to adult survival. I'll back up for a second. The research that they did on the in-stream substrate, at the same time, they also looked at the survival of the natural area versus the survival in the incubators. And the naturally spawned fish survived at about a 20% survival, and out of the incubators, just putting the eggs in there, letting them sit all winter and coming out, no egg care at all, they were achieving about, and continue to achieve about 75% survival. And then last, I had to throw up a picture of, this is end of egg take in, I believe, the beginning of October, and teamwork. I wanted to bring that up real quick because there's been a lot of neat and interesting people through the years that have worked on these projects, several of whom are sitting in this room, and none of that could be done without them. So I really wanted to throw that out there. Thanks to all those people. That's it, so I'll take some questions.